This painting looks simple, but nothing is more wrong. Here's why. The Great Wave by Hokusai. An artist inspires people through their art, but imagine being the inspiration for a whole era of artists by just one work of theirs. He calls himself an old man who was crazy enough to paint. Dragons and deities of a culture that is forever remembered for its art. Today we look at a poster boy's obsession for Japanese art and what things that led to. The Great Wave. The Great Wave of Kanagawa is a part of a series of paintings under the title 36 Views of Mount Fuji, made by Hokusai between 1830 and 1833. The art is a woodblock print made of ink and color on paper. The work of the artist is depicted in great measure. Starting with the series in which the painting resides, all of the images in the series show the impeccable beauty of the mountains artistically. However, you can see that Mount Fuji does not dominate the frame in the way a painting depicts its subjects. The foreground is carved with enormous waves crashing onto the subject. The threatening waves are captured in the most abrupt way possible, crashing onto 3 fishing boats crunched under it. But that is just a deception created by Hokusai to use the perspective of the mountain, which is made tiny, looks as if it is going to be swallowed up by the waves. But the rhetorical part of all this is that the foam falling onto the mountains look like snow is falling on the mountain. Hokusai was always a great admirer of Mount Fuji in his way. He had arranged a composition to understand the depths of the mountain. He had done a pretty great job by portraying the cultural dimensions of the mountain through his series of art, but that was by far his stop in expressing his gratitude. The curves of the waves in the mountain out of perspective combined with the hull of one boat dipped down just low enough to make it possible to see the beauty of the mountain behind it. The white top of the conquering waves creates a diagonal line that leads the viewer's eye to see the beauty of a preserved peak. Why Mount Fuji? Mount Fuji is the highest mountain in Japan and has always been considered sacred and a part of their tradition, but the real reason for this mountain to be chosen by the artist is said to be more of a connection between the wonder and Hokusai. This is what led Hokusai to create this masterpiece of a series. There was a statement to be made too. The choice of this landmark also led to a boom in domestic travel and the corresponding market for images and a historical overview of Mount Fuji. The woodwork, that is, the art itself, was often collected by many as a souvenir. The people varied from townsmen to historians and artists. This was a piece of their history and they preserved it. This also led many people, townspeople, to explore the undying beauty of Mount Fuji. Today, this beauty is covered up by the ever-growing skyscrapers of the city. In those days, the mountain was the only thing visible by a lifted head. It was early visible across the city. Ukiyo-e prints. Ukiyo-e is the name for Japanese woodblock prints, which were art on a piece of wood, yet very attractive. This term originated as a Buddhist term that means floating world. It refers to the impermanence of the world. There was a history to this kind of art as well. First, they were mostly black and white, and later it is seen through the work of Hokusai that color became prominent in his work as well. The usage of color was the other way of showing the rich content passed through a simple piece of wood. This form of art became very popular very quickly. A separate block of wood was used for each color, which told its part of the work that went into it. Each print is made with an overlay of the black line, which helped to break up similar colors. Nevertheless, the true form was when the art was completed, revealing all the details that flowed in the artist's mind while he had just a perfect picture in his mind. The woodwork is recognizable for its emphasis on line and pure, bright color, and its ability to distill form down to the minimum. Hokusai was touched by the tradition that was kept floating through the people of their culture. The actors and courtesans were the subjects of his work mostly, but he had an alternate and yet more artistic move of his. His subjects were the Japanese people and their daily life. The subjects were unique in their way of social differences. The Great Wave is a perfect example of his work style. The fishermen battling the furious sea and the representation of their culture, and in the background through Mount Fuji. These were just how different his work was in the same art style, and this is what gave the breakthrough of a 70-year-old artist in the form of his uniqueness. Hokusai the artist. Hokusai was born in 1760 in Edo, Japan, which is now known as Tokyo City. During the artist's lifetime, He went by many names, but he began calling himself Hokusai around 1797. He was drawn by the Dutch artwork gained through the trade with the Dutches. He became keen on the work of linear art of the Dutch. He has also recreated and represented that style in a Japanese work of his. This was just the beginning of the works he was yet to cascade. We can also see the influence of the Dutch artwork in the use of low horizon lines and the distinctive color of the European Empire that is Prussian blue. This artwork still influences many contemporary artists and designers to this day. It became something of a brand and became influential for many artists, a work famous for being famous, recognized, and celebrated, possibly without even questioning its reason. It influenced many street artists who painted the walls of the entire planet with this well-known image. Hokusai was interested in oblique angles, which can be seen in many of his great works, near and far contrasts, and man-made and natural. This can be easily seen in the Great Wave through the juxtaposition of the large wave in the foreground, which dwarfs the small mountain in the distance, and the inclusion of the men and boats amidst the powerful waves. Inspiration in the artwork. The work itself speaks a lot about the position of Japan in times of isolation, but it came with its trades as well. The influence of Western ideas and part of the ideas development of a traditional Japanese society. The philosophical differences and similarities were visible in the minds of every artist in that period. But on the contrary, what is interesting is the fact that Japan opened its port for trade and foreign visitors only around 1859, but it is evident that the influence of trade was there well before that. The usage of Prussian blue, for example, is one of many ways we can conclude with the theory, but the ports also laid a foundation for the art to travel worldwide, from Europe to the Middle East. The influence was marked, such as in Debussy's symphonic sketches La Mer. The Great Wave by Hokusai, it turns out, includes the depictions of the mathematical form of two different kinds of water waves, which was given by William Thomson, later Baron Kelvin, and would go on to analyze J.M.W. Turner, Hokusai's contemporary, proved an equally acute observer of the properties of waves in his studies of this topic. Monet, who studied both, fell considerably short with the ways to depict this in the form of art, regardless of his ways of understanding it, but for Hokusai, the wave, and Fuji, it was different. The culmination was eminent for the artist, human striving suspended, dwarfed by the forces of change and the seeming stillness of nature. By the time Hokusai painted the Great Wave, he was a celebrity in Japan for this various other works. The iconic print was produced in 1831 as part of a print series. The 36 views of Mount Fuji, within a few years of his death at 89 in 1849, Hokusai's fame spread worldwide and was a trademark of the art being exported through Japan. But his most famous work was on its way to becoming a global icon. To this day, the work of this old man, who was crazy enough for art, is studied for the search for meaning in one's art form. What do you think of this painting? Did you find it wrong? Comment below and subscribe for more.